I'll just go to the next one here. One breakout for 2024. What do you got?
Well, I think it's pretty easy. I think Drake London would be that guy, but the other one too, a quarterback, Anthony Richardson, I think could break fantasy this year if things go right. I told you I love Steichen, and I've already seen with the early consensus, which is funny because the early ECR is basically us fantasy pros goons, like getting up there and making our ranks. So I know I'm very high on him. Debro is, Erickson is, Fitz is. So like we're all kind of pushing that. I'm really curious to see what happens as other people start putting their ranks up post draft and what that really looks like because at the earliest rankings, CJ Stroud was going ahead of Richardson. Now that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's a really interesting pivot point to what's going on in super flex formats right now. How good could he be with a healthy offseason with, putting in the work, which I think he's going to do. It's a special talent, and maybe we're overrating him, and that's possible. And maybe he'll come back to bite us. But in terms of a breakout, I think that whole Colts team, him and Pittman together, could be really special this year. So that would be my big breakout besides Drake London. I think London's just in a perfect spot there this year.
Do you have him over guys like Stroud, Jordan Love?
I have him over right now. I do. And the reason is that rushing equity. And I also want to see what what happens in the draft too. Like the Bengals really need to keep figuring out that offensive line issue. Like they just have to, we have to do a better job here. And I know we thought we did, and it just didn't happen. And, I love Joe Burrow. I think he's a fantastic quarterback. I myself am surprised. I made my rankings and I went over actually to look at them this morning and see what the ECR was currently. And I couldn't believe that Richardson was 6 over Burrow. Like I couldn't believe that was the early consensus. But then I realized it's all my, idiot friends over there. We're all kind of thinking the same way. So I'm curious to see what does the rest of the group think? Because all this ECR stuff, all this ADP, all it is polling, right? That's all it is at the end of the day. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just polling. And polls aren't always correct. We've seen that in the last couple of years, I think, in the last decade. But I think we have to understand what the upside is for Richardson, especially in those super flex leagues. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see over the summer how that quarterback board does change as Burrow gets healthier, as people keep talking about the Texans and what they could do. Texans were an incredibly public team, especially from the money situation and betting side towards the second half. So they went from being undervalued to overvalued. So I'm really curious to see if that hangover carries over into fantasy in 2024.
Do you guys have Stroud, or do you have Richardson over Stroud?
No, I have Stroud over Richardson now. I'll probably keep that. The one I'm struggling with is Love over Richardson. I think once he's fully healthy, that'll change for me. Not that I don't expect him to be, but I just want to wait and see, before that happens. Because Love was fantastic to end the season last year too. I think we have, and this is kind of why, you've seen in every draft I've done so far, just waiting on quarterback is the smartest thing to do. I mean, you have such this group of guys that are going to be ranked anywhere from 6 to 12 that all have the ability to be top 5 quarterbacks, in my opinion. So Stroud, Love, 100%. Richardson, Kyler, these guys, they're all such high ceiling plays that you're getting at such discounts. And again, you see the draft that we did on Tuesday to get Jordan Love as I think it was the 11th quarterback off the board. Don't expect that to happen very often, but that's just playing the board, and as I told you, if it wasn't going to be Love, it would have been Kyler Murray for me, and I would have been thrilled with that.
Okay. Dave, any thoughts?
No, I've got Love at the top of the list just because of how he finished last year and how he was able to put up fantasy points almost regardless of what wide receivers were available in Green Bay. Jaden Reed was on fire. He got hurt, became a wideout that played half the snaps the rest of the way. It's Romeo Doubs stepping up in the playoffs. It's Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton late into the season. It's Tucker Kraft. Jordan Love found a way to make it work with whoever was out on the field. That's the telltale sign of a good quarterback. And I think that Jordan Love is exactly that. I know Josh Jacobs is there to take away some touchdowns. That stings a little bit, but we saw Love average 25 fantasy points per game in his final 9. It's a small sample size, but I think he could get somewhere between 22 and 25. Getting that dude as the 11th quarterback off the board is insanely good. Definitely worth the idea of waiting on a quarterback, finding one that comes at a value. You can't believe the value that it's at, and then you take them.
And Joe, for you guys are going off 4 points for passing touchdowns or 6?
I believe it's going off of 4.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
But you know what? To Jamie's point too, in single quarterback leagues, 100%. Like 100%. Like you wait, you'll get a Love. I mean, you'll get Herbert for free. You'll get Kirk Cousins right now going as the 16th quarterback, which I think that's going to change over time too. Tua is out there outside the top 12. So waiting this year, especially, it's a smart thing to do because the 6, as you're alluding to, that 6 through 12 group, I mean, they're going to be super close in terms of relative position value, which is the black book system of evaluating players. Like they're going to be right there. So why reach for any of them? But if I was to reach for one, it would be Richardson because there is that possibility where it becomes top 5. Whereas I don't know about the other guys in that 6 through 12. Maybe Love could do it if he can be that consistent, drag that second half over into a full season. That'd be great to see. And maybe he can do it. And that would be fantastic. But at the same time, in the super flex formats, I think we're in that same thing we were in last year, not quite as bad as last year, but last year was really brutal. When you're looking in that second grouping at QB2, it was landmine after landmine, rookie starters here, second year guys there, inexperience everywhere. And what did it do? It dragged down not just the quarterback play, but then you had the injuries on top of it. Then you had it dragging down all the other wide receivers with them. It was brutal. And I'm not saying it's going to be markedly better this year, but I think it will be a bit better because this quarterback class seems like it's going to be a little bit more helpful in that sense. And some of the bottom pieces, whether it be, the Baker Mayfields of the world. Like Baker Mayfield's 22 right now, but Baker Mayfield was more than serviceable last year as a second quarterback.
And just to, I think, put in perspective, if we're talking 4 points, he's 5th for me too, Richardson.
Yeah, okay.
I still think I'm going to take Stroud over him in 4 point. You're not, obviously. So who's ahead of him, Jamie? Who are the 4?
The top 4.
Okay.
The 3 Joe mentioned, Allen.
I'm still going to take Burrow and Stroud over him.
And I get it. I totally understand.
yet.
And I think that's where Joe's coming from too, where he said he's struggling with Burrow versus Richardson. But
I think in most drafts you'll see Burrow and Stroud go over him, which is why I don't think this early consensus is necessarily going to be what the ADP is. I think after the draft, everybody starts to really dig into it. Everyone get really excited about, but Joe Burrow's healthy. Everything looks good. Like, all that stuff happens. And the more CJ Stroud talk and the publicity is going to be there. I don't know about the publicity around Richardson outside of all of us fantasy nerds. Like, I don't know about what that's going to look like.
Plus, you'll get one of these guys that's going to get a surprise receiver added in the draft. It could be
Right.
Houston. They've been in on some guys, free agency in the draft and trade. I don't think it'll be Love, but you never know. But there's going to be somebody that gets a surprise rookie, and we're like, oh, okay, that changes things. Indianapolis could do that too. There's some talk about them upgrading over Alec Pierce, so there'll be something that changes it. But I do think in one quarterback leagues, he's the type of guy, Richardson, that there are so many decent number 2 quarterbacks. You mentioned a few of those, but like Matthew Stafford and Trevor Lawrence and even Deshaun Watson, there's just guys that can get you by if Richardson does struggle or get hurt, that you swing for the fences with him because he is that type of difference maker. So yeah, to put him in a breakout category is perfect.